Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Just to let you know, today's webinar is recorded. So if you, at any stage you think actually this would be useful for a friend who's in the same position as me, or you are just finding it hard to kind of take everything in, please do bear in mind this is a recorded webinar that will be available to all schools, whether you're Jigsaw or not, all schools, Jigsaw and non-Jigsaw. And it will be on our website, so in our Knowledge Hub area. So please do take note that this is a recorded webinar today. There will be opportunity for questions today, but what I would suggest is rather than putting your questions in the chat, as we're chatting through today's webinar, if you could hold fire on your questions till near the end of our webinar, because you might find that as I'm chatting, actually the question you asked does get answered potentially during our talk today. But yeah, we have got some space near the end of our webinar today to answer questions. And if there is a question I can't answer, then of course I will follow that up with you at a later date as well. So yeah, good afternoon. My name is Bethan Hall. I'm the programme lead for 11 to 16. I'm also joined by Efrosini, who's on the webinar today. We've both written the 11 to 16 programme, so we know it very, very well. And we've also been heavily involved with the mapping and the documentation that supports with the programme itself. So again, at the end of today's webinar, I have provided my email address. So if you do have any particular questions on anything, it might well be related to today's webinar, or it might be that there's something else regarding the programme that you have further questions over. Please do feel free to get in contact with me. Okay, so what we're looking at today is initially we're going to start by looking at the legal position and what has changed within the DfE guidance. The majority of the guidance regarding policy has remained the same, but there is some further guidance and some further clarification on some areas that I'd love to point you in the direction of. We're going to clarify what your policy must include. So whilst I assume that a lot of you sitting here today are in a position where actually you just want to make sure that your policy is in line with the DfE guidance, we're going to have a recap as to what your policy must include and whether any of those areas in the DfE guidance have changed. We're going to have a look at the 7 guiding principles, which can be found within the DfE RSHE guidance. And we're also going to have a look at consultation processes regarding parents, governors, carers, and of course, we'll have a little look at also pupil engagement in that process as well. Throughout, when we're talking about consultation, we'll be giving you some practical approaches to this and some tools that you can possibly use as well. And referring to our step-by-step steps to success document and also a review process regarding your policies. So as we're chatting today, we are going to be dropping in the chat some links and possibly some resources that you might find useful. This webinar is for both Jigsaw schools and non-Jigsaw schools, but you may find that some of the materials and resources I'm talking about are available on the portal for our Jigsaw schools, but we will be sharing some things also with our non-Jigsaw schools today. So the DfE guidance, so stripping this straight back down, the schools essentially do have to teach the 2 main sections within the DfE guidance. So we have a relationships and sex education section and also the health and wellbeing section of the DfE guidance itself. Whilst this is for secondary schools, this webinar today, it's really important we look at both the primary and secondary expectations. Because if you're thinking about parent consultation, a lot of your parents that are in year 6 at the minute coming to you in year 7, they will have a certain experience as to what they perceive maybe the guidance to be from a primary perspective. So it's really important you're aware of those differences. So at primary, it's compulsory to be teaching the relationships education and health education sections of the guidance. Sex education is non-statutory, so it is up to schools whether they choose to deliver that. However, it's very highly recommended for years 5 and 6. However, at secondary, it is compulsory for all of it to be taught. So relationships, sex education, and health education. There isn't a choice there for schools to choose whether they teach the sex education aspects or not. With regards to right to withdraw, and we will look at that in a little bit more depth later in today's webinar, but there are differences between primary and secondary. So secondary, they do have a right to withdraw, and they do also at primary as well. But again, sometimes in terms of what some schools might perceive as being sex education, that is very important, that you're starting to think about what would you say is sex education? How would you define that? So to begin with, you need to start to look at your policies and decide, what would we perceive in the programme as being sex education? And of course, today's webinar is going to support you in doing that. So as mentioned, the definition of sex education is really important, and that's so that parents and carers and young people know exactly which lessons cover sex education content. Now, the DfE doesn't highlight specifically what they would define as sex education. They have left that to schools to decide themselves and to define themselves. At Jigsaw, we have got a right to withdraw document, which is on the portal. And again, this highlights what our definition of sex education is. And also we've identified the lessons that we perceive as sex education. Now, it is quite subjective. So it is important that when you're looking at your policies, you're referring to that and deciding, do we agree with this? Or do we want to create our own definition and our own decide ourselves which lessons we would perceive as sex education? So we've given you a starting point, but again, it is ultimately schools' decision on that. So parents and carers have got the right to withdraw their children from any PSHE lessons that are defined as sex education by the school. And a young person can opt back into sex education lessons up to 3 terms before their 16th birthday if they want to. And that's regardless of the parent and carer's wishes. So this, again, must be reflected in your policy in terms of your right to withdraw procedures, what your definition of sex education is, and also whether there are any particular areas within the guidance that you feel may have particularly sensitive topics as well relating to this. So this is directly drawn from the DfE guidance itself. So all schools must have an up-to-date written policy for relationships, education, or where they teach sex education for RSE. Schools must proactively engage and consult parents when they develop and review their policy, ensuring parents understand that effective RSHE is important for promoting and protecting the well-being of all children. So it is a DfE requirement to have an RSE policy. And these are 3 also non-negotiables that must be in place within your school. So firstly, your policy must be published on your school website. Your policy must be available free of charge to anyone who requests it. And also your policy must be kept up to date and reflective of current practice. Now, none of this is new. So this was already in place in the 2019 guidance, but we're just reiterating and making sure that very clear here as to what is a DfE requirement and what must be in place in your school regarding policy. Now, the DfE guidance also gives some specific examples as to what must be included in your policy. So here we have, and it goes across two slides here, we have some criteria that as we're going through this, I really want you to reflect upon, does our policy do this? As mentioned before, this webinar is recorded, so you're welcome to come back to this at some point. But we do, on the right there, you can see a screenshot of a policy review audit tool that we've also got available for our Jigsaw schools. I will be explaining where you can find this in the portal nearer later in today's session, but again, it's there just to support you to have an opportunity to review you might be in a position where you're just reviewing and tweaking your original policy, or you might be creating one from total scratch, and this is there just to support you to do so. So initially, set out the subject content. So what will be taught, how and when. Then state who is responsible for teaching, and that's including any external providers. Differentiate between relationships education and sex education, which is what we've just talked about previously. Include parents' right to request withdrawal from sex education, again, as discussed before. Explain how content will be accessible for pupils with SEND. Describe how the subject is monitored and evaluated. Set out how parents can view curriculum materials. Now, the new guidance does very clearly state, and I would say this is very loud and clear within the new guidance, the importance of transparency when it comes to working with parents and sharing materials with parents. And we're going to delve into that and a lot more later in today's webinar. But again, that, in terms of how you are sharing giving opportunities for parents to view curriculum materials, that needs to be included and mentioned within your policy. Explain how teachers will handle questions about topics not covered in the DfE guidance or from where a child has been withdrawn. And also, I think it's very clear in the guidance how teachers need, what the school is doing to support teachers with particularly sensitive questions or sensitive topics as well. So there needs to be some kind of policy or guidance within that policy about procedures regarding, the delivery of sensitive topics or sensitive questions that may be asked and how a teacher can deal with that. And then explain how the policy was produced, who approves it, and when it will be reviewed. So regarding all of these tick points, again, this is within our audit, but does your current policy address all these points? And we're going to be taking a step-by-step approach to reviewing and moving forward today in our webinar and sharing with you other considerations that you need to put in place when you're considering your RSHE or RSE policy. Okay, so we're going to break it down into these 5 steps. So sometimes when you're looking at your policy, you think, well, what comes first? Is it consultation? Is it us looking at our materials? Is it looking at the policy? Which one comes first? So we would suggest your starting point is really looking at your existing PSHE policy. And I mentioned PSHE because some schools might have an RSHE policy, some might have a PSHE which mentions RSHE within it. Good practice really is to have a PSHE policy which has RSHE embedded within it. So you're really framing all of those skills as that are also found within PSHE and having an RSHE programme within it. Established communication channels, making sure you're thinking about what's your staff experience, and then links to other key school policies. So, for example, your behaviour policy, your safeguarding policy, having some consideration about, reviewing these alongside each other to making sure that they are in line with each other and also up to date with the most current guidance as well, deciding whether there's any impact there. Well, then the next thing you then need to do is begin to really, bring in your staff and your governors on board here with you, meet with them and share that journey with them that you're going through and making sure that they're aware of maybe some of the aspects that need to be considered as well. So that then builds that shared understanding and engages both staff and governors in that process. We will be touching upon why governor consultation and sharing your understanding with them is really important. But again, this will inform your RSHE review as well. So once you've met with your staff and governors and looked at maybe the PSHE policy where it is, and then moving forward is to, aligning that with the new guidance, you then need to draft or update your policy. So again, you could use that audit to checklist and address all the statutory requirements. Then also agree your approach to sex education. Do you still agree with the definition that is already in place? I know I've been a PSHE lead before, as has Efrosini, who's on the call, and we know that people move on to different jobs and a new PSHE lead comes in and times change. So it might well be actually it's a great opportunity to start to decide, do we need a fresh approach to maybe what sex education is? Do we need some further guidance? There are other topics there that weren't within the last guidance, sextortion, for example, being one of them. Do we need mention of that with regards to our sex education definition, making it clear what we see as not sex education, even though there might be elements of sex education in it? And why is that the case? So again, we have some more topics that maybe blur lines, I would say, between what is sex education and what is not. And if you're deciding that it is not sex education, you need to state that and explain your reasons as well. You then need to gather supporting documents to share with policy as well. Okay, then comes our engaging parents, carers and pupils. So again, before you finalise your policy, you must be making sure that your parents have an opportunity to see the draft policy prior to, and have a consultation opportunity prior to the final document itself becoming final. So hold meetings, find opportunities to share your draft policy and gather feedback. And select a clear feedback deadline as well. So you're making it clear exactly what the timelines are here, when there is opportunity to make comment and to share understanding as well. Gather pupil voice through age-appropriate methods as well, which we'll be delving upon a little bit later on too. And when all that's in place, that's when you can finalise and communicate. So review your feedback, document your reasoning, seek governor approval, and then publish your updated policy. So again, as I mentioned before, your policy needs to be on your website or made freely available to anyone that asks for it. And then rather than just putting your policy on a shelf and thinking, right, we've done the box, think about, okay, long-term wise, when are we next going to then plan our ongoing engagement cycle with our parents, with our carers, and with our governors, so making sure that we're keeping that loop going as well. So this particular document, again, available on the portal for Jigsaw Schools. This guides you through those 5 steps I've just mentioned there. And it's a really useful document that just guides you through that particular process step by step. So as you can see here, step 1, step 2, 3, 4, and 5. And it just simplifies and highlights things that you might need to consider through each of those steps. If after today's webinar you're struggling to find any of these documents on the portal, please do get in touch with me. But they are actually all in one area of the portal, and we'll be sharing a link with you. And in fact, Eleni, if you could pop that in the link in the chat now, for our Jigsaw Schools. There is, if you scroll down a little bit on this site that Efrosini is about to share, you'll see there's an area saying get ready for September 2026. And within here, you can find all the documents that we're talking about today. Now, within the DfE guidance, it states 7 guiding principles. And I really like this part of the guidance because it is a lot of there's some fantastic work going on in schools. And I would like to think the majority of schools are already doing this, but it just sets in stone that, yes, these are what the topics are we're going to be talking about, but this is how we should be doing it. This is what good PSHE looks like. So in the 7 guiding principles, you can see they're listed on the right of the screen. And we're going to unpick this a little bit because as part of your policy, you should really be starting to consider these 7 guiding principles and how you can weave this into your PSHE policies as well. So the first one, engagement with pupils. So the guidance states that an inclusive and well-sequenced RSHE curriculum should be informed by meaningful engagement with pupils to ensure that the curriculum is relevant and engaging. So these are some questions that I would like you to consider. So first of all, how do you currently gather feedback from pupils about their PSHE learning? And that's what we should really be starting with. Okay, so this, our PSHE is there to be there for our students, there for our pupils. So is it fit for purpose? Is it engaging them? Is it current? Is it meeting the needs of what they need at school right now? Do pupils have opportunities to share what they find helpful or confusing? We're moving obviously onto a new 2026 guidance. So what a great opportunity now to start to reflect upon your actual, your PSHE in your schools and reflect about, consider like, are there anything we want to change? Is there anything we want to improve on? Let's ask our students. So what a great place to start. Engagement and transparency with parents. So the second point here is that schools should engage with parents on the content of RSHE and be transparent with parents about all materials used. So first of all, it makes very clear in the guidance that all materials should be available for parents to view. Now, in terms of like, what do we mean by view? We will be looking at parent consultation, but initially I would say that you should be sharing a sample of lessons with your parents. And then if a parent actually asks and requests, I'd like to see more, or I'd like to see what they're doing this term, for example, you should be in a position where you can share that, whether that's either Again, you need to consider in your school how you're going to do that. We do have a parent access system available, which I'm going to be talking to you about a little bit later. But yeah, that is something, if you're not in a position at the minute where you can share your materials with parents easily, that is something you do need to consider. But it also needs to be written in your policy as to how you are doing that. Do you inform parents in advance of when sex education content is being taught? So again, you get bringing parents on this journey with you. Parents shouldn't be in a position really where a child's coming home and they're, as a parent, surprised they're having these conversations in school. They should be knowing that's happening and knowing that those conversations might continue at home. And it allows that home and that school relationship, having those two things aligned together, really then supports that child from both sides as well. Positivity. So focusing on building positive attitudes and skills, avoiding language that normalises harmful behaviour or stigmatises any group of pupils. So does your curriculum support this approach? Careful sequencing. Pupils should be equipped with knowledge before they encounter situations in real life. And again, this is all taken directly from the DfE guidance. So consider, I know sometimes we get asked, questions, for example, on, sexting. When should we be teaching about this in the secondary content? So at Jigsaw, all of our content is very much designed in a way that looks at what does the research tell us. So what does data tell us? When are young people being exposed to some of these situations? And that's really where we should be starting from. And then thinking about, well, how can we build the skills for these young people to be able to tackle this before, just when that issue arises, obviously in an age and stage appropriate way. When or if, should I really say, is your curriculum sequence so that learning precedes experience? So obviously teaching sexting in year 11 and you haven't touched upon it before then, that's not really going to be doing your children any, really supporting them with that situation or that awareness as well. Relevant and responsive. So the curriculum should reflect the specific needs of your community and, where appropriate, and draw on local partners as well. So number 6 is skilled delivery. So the curriculum should be delivered by school staff or external providers who have the knowledge, skills and confidence to create a safe and supportive environment. So staff must also be trained in safeguarding and prepare for the possibility of disclosures. So ask yourself, do staff feel confident delivering RSHE? Are there any particular topics or themes that are within the new guidance that you think your staff will need further support with? Now is a great time to get started. Try not to leave it till September when your teachers might already be, well, they will be already leading the new DfE guidance. Try and get a step ahead and start to decide, okay, which areas are we going to need support with, and decide, is there going to be some further training needed? Whole school approach. So curriculum is best delivered as part of a whole school approach to well-being and positive relationships, supported by other school policies. And what we really mean here is, and I've mentioned before, that consider how does your RSHE curriculum connect with your behaviour and safeguarding policies as well. So that is something that you do need to reflect upon and try and make those connections and see whether there might be some links or some updates possibly needed. So regarding these 7 guiding principles, you need to really reflect upon which ones you think your school does really well, and is there any area there that you think might benefit from some further attention and some further detail, maybe, whether that be in your policy or for you to just reflect upon, as a PSHE lead and on your actual curriculum itself and delivery of that. And this can really be a useful starting point for staff meeting discussions as well, having a look at some of these particular areas of the DfE guidance too. So looking at why do we consult on RSHE and PSHE? So we don't do that in any other subject, as far as I'm aware, within school. We don't typically consult anywhere on other content and other curriculum areas. But RSE is different for 5 key reasons. First one, the most obvious one, is it's a sensitive subject. When it comes to consultation, you will be discussing topics with parents from a diverse backgrounds at times, and from lots of different perspectives on things as well. And also students have different perspectives on things also. So understanding the angle on all the different angles that maybe a particular sensitive subject might be perceived or angles of perspective on is really important to consider. Mutual respect. So that also models the respectful relationships and values that RSHE teaches. It's also statutory. So it is statutory for RSE, and it's also good practice. So whether it was statutory or not, it is still good practice as part of a wider RSHE. Shared responsibility. So children learn about and are applying skills and knowledge in and out of the classroom. So they're going to be going home and having these conversations at times with parents about things they've talked about in RSHE and PSHE. So bring your parents on, bring them on board with you. Allow them the opportunity to see what their child might be learning about. And so then when those conversations possibly come home and open up, on the dinner table, they're in a position where they're not really set back a little bit, that they're ready for them a little bit more. Confidence. So staff, governors, parents and pupils, they all need to feel comfortable with the subject. And sometimes I think a lot of parents, their perception maybe as to what RSHE and PSHE, their only experience is what they've experienced at school. So you have to kind of remind yourselves, as teachers, we're in a position where we can see maybe some of the conversations they're having with their other peers, and those conversations might not be quite as evident at home. We can see perhaps some of what the research tells us about what students are experiencing. And again, it's also making sure that I suppose RSHE has come a long way since perhaps even when I was at school. So, making sure that giving parents that confidence that actually we are here and what we're doing here is for the benefit of your child. And this is why we're doing it. That's essentially what we're really wanting to do. Now, you can understand why some parents might feel sometimes quite concerned about what their child is being taught about in PSHE and RSHE. We know the media sometimes shows some bad examples as to what's happening in schools. But we also know that the majority of schools, that is not the case. And actually a lot of when a parent does have concerns, it is often rooted in love and not opposition. They're just trying to protect their child and do what they think is right for their child. And you have to remind yourself when you're having those conversations with parents, that is the angle that majority of parents will be coming from. They're not coming necessarily from an obstructive angle. So our goal here is to move from managing parents to genuinely involving them, and having these sometimes by closing your doors and not having those conversations, it then builds this fear amongst the parents about what are they being taught. And majority of the time when you show parents what they're being taught and why, it really does put parents more at ease than perhaps not bringing them along the journey with them and them finding out a secondhand version as to what happened in that lesson today. Okay, so in terms of, first of all, we need to highlight what is consultation and what isn't. So initially, we need to look at setting those boundaries. So, and this is straight from the RSHE guidance, that parents are not able to veto curriculum content, but schools must consult with parents when developing the RSHE policy. And it is right that they are able to see what their children are being taught. So we're not saying that parents can come in and say, you can't teach this, you can teach that. What we're saying is that we need to be really consulting with parents and sharing what we're doing, and listening to their concerns if there are any. So consultation is a genuine process of listening and considering parental views, an opportunity to explain the purpose and content of the curriculum, and a means of building confidence and trust. Consultation is not a vote on curriculum content, an opportunity for parents to remove topics they disagree with, and a process that gives any individual parent a veto as well. So schools must be able to demonstrate how and where they've considered parental views as part of their consultation process, particularly with the RSHE policy as well. So these are some things to consider. And again, these are some very clear expectations that the guidance states. So initially, the first one here is proactive engagement. So invite parents into school to discuss curriculum content. Support them to talk to their children at home as well. Think about how you can proactively engage with your parents at school. Show materials. So I mentioned this previously, but showing a representative sample of resources initially is a really good starting point. Most parents will be quite happy with that in terms of the level of what they're seeing initially. But all PET materials must then be available upon request. So a parent then wants to see some further detail about what their child has been taught that term, for example, that needs to be made available. Inform parents of change. So if content shifts away from the published policy, parents must be kept informed of that. For example, it mentions here best practice to share materials via a parent portal, or if it's not possible through a presentation. There's some examples that the 2025 guidance has given as an example there. So in terms of copyright note, copyright, and again, this affects Jigsaw too, those schools that are delivering Jigsaw, it affects how materials are shared, but it shouldn't be used as a reason to refuse to share them. And again, that's direct from the guidance. Jigsaw materials may be shown in live meetings or via the parent access portal, but they cannot be emailed, sent home, or included in a pre-recorded webinar. We very much do still stand by that the best way of really, I suppose, engaging with parents is very much face-to-face. It allows you to, there's a couple of reasons. One of the main reason really is sometimes a parent may not understand the building blocks that has come to getting to that stage in that particular lesson. So what has been put in place beforehand. They might also not understand from the teacher's way of looking at a lesson might be very different to a parent's. So there might sometimes be that misinterpretation about what a slide is asking or the angle of the slide. And the teacher might have skills behind that slide that they're hoping to direct the conversation in a certain way. So there are lots of reasons, but we still feel that parent to teacher is the best way of sharing materials, because it also allows the parent to ask questions directly and unpick any areas that they may have concerns with as well. So we have got, for those Jigsaw schools, what we call a parent access. This allows parents and carers to view the standard lesson plans and slides for their child's year group puzzle by puzzle. So this is how it works. First of all, a class teacher generates a unique code via the Jigsaw portal. I'm going to show you this in a minute on a slide as well. This code then allows the parent to view that half term's lesson plan and slides. So for example, Be Me, My World, or Celebrating Difference. Codes expire at the end of each half term, and parents may request a new code for the next puzzle. And every time they log in, parents agree to terms and conditions, which is mostly relating to not resharing content. So that's how it works. If they've got more than one child in school, because it's very much related to the child's year group and puzzle, they will need to have more than one code, one per child. The recommended approach here is to share codes only with parents who specifically request access and not as a blanket code to the whole class. And this then allows you to identify which parents are engaging with the materials and to offer follow-up support if needed. Just at the minute, because we have got our 2019 lessons on the portal and our 2026, because all of our materials are now up to date to the new guidance, there are two sets of lesson plans and slides that will be visible on the portal. Lessons from the updated programme are badged with an RSHE 2026 sash though. So if you're sharing parent access codes at the minute, it's very important that you're informing parents clearly which set of lessons you're teaching from that half term. We anticipate that the majority of schools will still be delivering I want to say 2019, but they've been obviously updated since then, but the ones that don't say 2026 on them. And then from September, all schools should then be referring to the 2026. So this is what it looks like. So I've got an example here for Healthy Me at the moment. You can see if you were to click into that unit, there's the two sets of lessons. You then click on Parent Access. I've got, I think it's a Year 7 lesson Healthy Me here. And then it generates at the bottom, it gives this, and then if you click to the bottom, it says Request Access Code. It then generates a code for you, and that'll be unique to the year group and that puzzle piece. You then click download and it downloads a PDF letter that you can give to parents. And on there, it gives them the link and then the parent access page and access code as well to that particular unit and age group. This is what it looks like. Okay, so you can share this with the parent that has requested it. And then again, you know, we do still recommend meeting in person, but we also know, you know, even if Rossini and I on the call today, we are working mums. It's not always easy to get into school. And also for teachers, that's not always, you know, possible. So we do know there's definitely a time and a place for a parent access like this. So jigsaw resources for parent and carers. So here we have, for those schools that are jigsaw, a couple of resources that we think are going to be very helpful for you when you're liaising with your parents and having those conversations. So first of all, we have our right to withdraw leaflet, which is the bottom one there. This one highlights, if you were to open that, it would tell you what a definition of sex education is at Jigsaw and which lessons we would say are designated sex education lessons. They've been mapped out there. So hopefully that will help you as a starting point to deciding which lessons are sex education and which lessons children or parents who request for their child to be withdrawn from sex education, which lessons those would be impacted there. We also have a snapshot overview of Jigsaw lessons for all year groups. This can be shared with parents, so feel free to utilise that as you wish. It just gives them a very brief summary as to what their child is learning about within each unit, very brief. Jigsaw 11-16, we've also got a parent and carers RSHE information leaflet, which goes into a little bit more depth about RSHE itself and how it is and what it's like within our PSHE Jigsaw programme. So again, please feel free to utilise those as and how you wish to. So we also have, and this is new on the portal at the minute, some slides that are available for PSHE leads to use when they're doing their parent and caring consultations. So these have got detailed notes and guidance also, just as you would with our lessons. You'll see it next to them, the notes. And it's essentially a presentation there, which we put together for you to use with your parents about RSHE and Jigsaw. We've also got Judy Allies, who's also somebody that we work with, and she's a great PSHE expert. She's also created a recorded demonstration of these slides for you. So essentially, I would say watch the demonstration. Judy picks out maybe some questions within there and the ways that she deliver each slide, and she highlights what maybe parents might want to know a little bit more on as well, so that you can interpret each slide and make sure you've got the full information that you need before feeling really prepped and going ready into those consultations. So hopefully you'll find that really useful. These are some examples as to the slides that can be found within this particular presentation. So yeah, this slide here is one of quite early on in the presentation. It just highlights what does the new guidance mean for children. And it highlights why that, you know, this particular guidance is useful. There is a document here which has been produced by the DfE, which we also refer to, which is called New RSHE Guidance, What Parents Need to Know. I think it's really well written. So I would really I'd really consider sharing that with your parents as well, because it answers some questions in a really meaningful way, and answers a lot of the questions that maybe some parents might have as well. So please have a look at that. I'd really recommend digging that one out and having a read of that and possibly sharing that with your parents too. This is another slide from our this particular presentation that's for parents. It's talking about the transparency and how the materials are going to be shared with parents and carers as well. So again, it talks about how you need to think about when you're presenting to parents, making them very clear where they can get further information as well. And that's really important as part of your consultation. So as we mentioned, we know that engaging with parents face-to-face and virtual meetings are really valuable for sharing your whole school approach and how content develops across year groups, showing actual resources like lesson plans, worksheets, slides and animations. So our previous consultation slides that I've just talked about previously, we have got examples of lesson plans and content for each age group within that presentation. Addressing misconceptions in real time. Okay, so don't letting a parent doesn't want to go away and maybe sometimes build an image maybe in their head as to what's going on. Like, have those conversations, be open and transparent about maybe some of the fear they might have behind some of those and anxiety behind some of the content that is within the guidance. Supporting parents in talking to their children at home as well. Now, there are other effective channels that you might want to consider. So again, today after today's webinar, please think about do we do any of these? Should we be doing any of these? So one of them could be sharing your draft policy via email. We've talked about the fact that you need to really consult with parents before finalising your policy. Parent portal, app or letter with a clear invitation to respond. Termly topic overviews. So I've talked about our snapshot overview and having opportunity to share that with parents as well. Newsletters, school website, notice boards. And then also there's informal conversations that you can capture these alongside formal feedback too. Informal conversations are really valuable, I think, sometimes as well. So as well as engaging with parents and governors, we also need to consider pupils and how can we do this meaningfully? So there are some suggestive methods here that you could utilise. Surveys or suggestion boxes. So that encourages honest responses on sensitive topics. The DfE does clearly make it clear that I think there is some guidance within there that highlights, autonomy and the fact that, not to have surveys where you don't know who's maybe put the response in, because it doesn't allow you to track back if there are any potential safeguarding issues or follow something up. But there is maybe a time or place for sometimes, I believe, having that opportunity for students to maybe answer a question without having to feel like, they can't be as open as maybe they wanted to be. School council discussions, so a formal channel for feedback to reach staff. Class reflection activities, so at the end of each puzzle or unit of work, consider asking, like, what did you find useful? Which lessons did you enjoy? Was there another lesson you might need more further detail on? Or do you need more support in certain topics? Ask your students, refer back to use that, in time, like opportunities there. Conversations with pastoral staff. So there might be surface questions not raised in class, but pastoral staff might be aware of areas that maybe need further support within your PSHE programme. Pupil focus groups. So that provides that richer feedback, but it also requires that careful facilitation as well. So it's really important to the principals to really, I suppose, frame this, that pupil voice doesn't inform our decisions in terms of what we teach, but it does determine them. So we've got that, we have that professional judgment, those safeguarding considerations, and also that statutory requirements. They must always guide the curriculum, but we must be also considering the importance of pupil voice and how that can impact on our programmes as well. So in terms of feedback design, I've highlighted here some ideas. So open questions, they provide rich responses rather than just a yes or no. I've talked about anonymous here, that the DfE does advise against accepting anonymous responses because they can't be followed up. When you're not discussing maybe less like sensitive topics, for example, there possibly might be opportunity there for those more honest answers. Frame RSE content within your whole PSHE programme to avoid isolating sensitive topics. So questions you need to consider really is which engagement methods are already working well in your school? Is there one approach from this slide that you could strengthen or introduce before your consultation begins as well? Okay, moving on to governors and consultation with the governors. When you're consulting with governors, that's really to ensure that, first of all, they understand the statutory role in PSHE and RSHE. So they understand why we're doing this, that they're familiar with the sensitive content within the guidance. And also, if you were to, providing that training to governors, that enables them to be confident in supporting school decisions, responding to parental concerns, understanding statutory requirements, and also the sex education and right to withdraw. They understand the importance of stating that and having that very clear within policy. They need to be engaged early, so this shouldn't be an afterthought at all, so that they are key to the community confidence. Now we have on the right there, you can see here, there's an RSHE changes explained for governors webinar. This is available to all schools, both Jigsaw and non-Jigsaw schools, and it is available in our on our website, in our Knowledge Hub. There's an on-demand section for webinars there, and this has already been recorded. It is designed in a way that is for both Jigsaw schools and non-Jigsaw schools, and it doesn't delve into what has changed in Jigsaw programme. It delves into what has changed in the DfE guidance. So this is, again, designed in a way that could be shared with your governors. So we know time is very precious, And we know that both governors and teachers and SLT, there's a lot going on. So this is a webinar that's designed for you to share with your governors, which will keep them up to date and include in as to what has changed in the guidance. So feel free to utilise that as you wish to. I believe, Efrosine, you've popped that in the chat, haven't you, as a link there too. So if you're thinking about, okay, if I've got a meeting with my governors coming up and we have RSHE on the agenda, what do we need to be talking about? So this is, again, for your step 2 meeting, we would suggest the following things. So what has changed and what is now required? Again, you could utilise our webinar as I highlighted before. Have a look at the 7 guiding principles we've looked at today. You could use these to review the current practice within your school as well. Identify things you might want to improve on, areas you think we do really well currently. Consider supporting pupils with SEND. So we know we've got a new curriculum, that means new materials for some. Think about, okay, how is that looking for our SEND community? How are we going to make sure that they are still able to access that learning? Make sure that you're, looping in your SENCO, making her, giving them opportunities to make adjustments to lessons and find ways to bridge that gap maybe at times so that it is accessible also. Consider your definition of sex education. I know I've gone about this quite a lot, but this is really important that you're reviewing this and making sure that you're reviewing your content in line with this as well. Pupil voice, so how do you currently gather this and how could it be strengthened? Staff confidence and training needs, and then also parental engagement approach. How are you going to consult and how will you share your materials as well? So these are all things that we feel at Jigsaw you should be starting to think about on your agenda when it comes to your next governor meeting, which focuses on this. So on the portal, you can see here in the main section of the materials, there's a get ready for September 2026. In here, there is so much there to support you. I would be amazed if there's something I haven't or we haven't produced so far that isn't going to really help. So we've got the following things there to support. So first of all, we've got a policy template. So if you are starting from total scratch and you've not created any policy, this is here and it has all of those, I suppose, audit checklists ticked off within this policy that will allow you a really good starting point for creating your policy. And it is designed in a way that it could be, you can amend it for your school as well. So you can take a look at this that could be a really great starting point for those that are starting from scratch. A guide to policy review and consultation. We also have this, which I know I've mentioned about previously, that can be found also within this area of the portal. We have a review checklist, so an audit essentially. So if you're actually just tweaking your original policy, making sure having a look at this and aligning it is really useful. Your right to withdraw document. And also we have other documents to support, and we have a protected characteristics mapping, behaviour document, and we will also have, coming on soon, our safeguarding guidance document soon also. So in terms of timeline to implementation, here we are at the minute. We are in our spring term, and this is where we should be starting to draft or update policies and starting to begin our consultation process and gathering pupil voice too. By the summer term, you should have reviewed and collated the feedback and agreed the changes and finalised policy. And then, once we've had that governor approval, it then needs to be published on the website, communicated to parents, and then you can plan that ongoing engagement cycle too. Now, Efrosine is going to share in the chat. We have a step-by-step guide, and I know I shared this in my January webinar, but this really does just bring everything together, taking you on that journey through, getting ready between now and September 2026. There are other steps there that you might find useful and other links to content, for example, and documentation that are going to support you with that as well. We also have further webinars coming up, so please keep an eye on both the Jigsaw Knowledge Hub for our webinars that are up and coming. We do think, there's going to be some, particularly in June, I would say onwards, that are also going to be there to support with particular content in the guidance too. So as I mentioned before, if you have any feedback from today's webinar or you want to ask any further questions, please do get in touch. We also have the link there. If you were to go onto there, that highlight takes you straight to our Knowledge Hub, which will take you to further webinars and both recorded previous webinars also. Thank you. So I'm just going to pass on to Efrosini now. Are there any questions, Efrosini?
We have no questions at all,
No
which means
questions.
your webinar presentation was very comprehensive, unless people are going to be typing them now.
If you have, and I'm going to give it a couple of minutes, if you've got any questions after today's webinar, please do pop them in the chat now. I will stop sharing and I can maybe have a look at the chat also now. Yeah, and if you've got any questions, please, now's your opportunity to do so. And I hope you found today's webinar helpful.